The last element of web components is called Shadow DOM. So far, we've looked at templates, which you can use to define reusable chunks of HTML. We know that we can store those templates in separate files and then import them using the HTML imports. And we also have touched upon creating custom elements. One of the biggest problems with web development is, by default, websites and web apps are somewhat brittle. When you consider the global nature of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you know that it's very easy to build web content, but it's also easy to interject problems once you start building larger projects. You've probably experienced an issue when you're working with a CSS file and you make a change to a particular style and it'll cause problems in other elements that were unintended. This also happens sometimes when you incorporate page content from multiple sources, because depending on where the elements come from, they might not have unique names or IDs. Often developers use the same sorts of name or IDs, and if there's a conflict with one of those, it can also cause problems. In addition, JavaScript also has its own set of problems. If you define a global variable as an object and another developer potentially wrote code that might overwrite those global variables or caused other issues, it can also be problematic to your project. As you've probably seen, sometimes when you insert a plugin into a project, it has very complex IDs or naming schemes that make it a little more difficult for you to understand how the project works, and it doesn't really solve the underlying problem because it also might bloat your code unnecessarily. In order to solve these problems, the best case scenario is that we would encapsulate both styles and scripts and content inside a custom element so that it wouldn't interfere with other content that's being used in the website or app. Shadow DOM allows us to accomplish this. By using Shadow DOM, all related HTML, CSS, and JavaScripts are kept local to the particular custom element that you're working on. You can think of Shadow DOM as being attached to an element in the page that the rest of the page can't see. It's almost like making a local DOM subtree, and it defines how that custom element's structure, appearance, and behavior will work without interfering with any other DOM elements. Most elements can work with Shadow DOM, but certain elements that already contain an internal shadow root, like the video element or audio element, aren't going to be able to be modified. There's also certain tags that are empty, and those don't really make sense to use as Shadow DOM elements. In the next video, I'll show you how you can define a simple Shadow DOM custom element, and then we'll look at how we can style it and give it a specific behavior. We'll also learn how we can allow users of the custom element a way to determine where the child content gets placed inside the custom element. Let's jump into learning more about Shadow DOM next.